Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way morning briefing. It is Wednesday, the 5th of June. My name is Ryan McGinley. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by a debutant, Joe Donnelly. Joe has joined us recently on News Quest. Joe, how are you doing this morning? How are you looking forward to doing your first show?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
No bother at all. You might have seen Joe before working for Celtic in the Celtic View, so a familiar face, one you definitely know who knows what he's speaking about. Before we get started and we talk about all things Celtic and all the transfer business and everything else, or anything that's coming up in the comments, we'll use your comments today because there's not that much news to go on about at this point in time, I don't think. Or there's no breaking news in the last half hour since the last time I checked. So I guess we'll keep an eye on that. Before we get started, we'd just like to thank MPH Group, who are opening a brand new kitchen showroom. They sponsor the podcast along with Weissman Boilers in Dunfermline, Fife, with a new VIP Vegas-themed launch weekend from June the 14th to June the 16th at 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. There'll be roulette games with instant win prizes like 10% off services, free boiler services, and the chance to enter a draw for bigger prizes. Land on zero and get entered into a grand draw for a 4-night stay in Las Vegas with a helicopter tour. Don't miss out. RSVP now at www.launch.mphgroup, mph.group to secure your spot. See you there. And just a wee quick shout out, anybody that wants to subscribe to the channel, www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. £4 for 4 months. It would really help us if you subscribe if you haven't done so already. We thank everybody for joining in. Over the past few months, the uptake has been absolutely incredible on the website, and we can't thank everybody enough. Joe, let's talk about Celtic, shall we? It's your very first show, so I thought we would do a more general podcast to ease you into things. First of all, we didn't have you on last season or any season before that. So what was your thoughts on last season as a whole? How did you think that went? Obviously, Brendan Rodgers' first season since returning to the club.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know you guys have spoken about this at length, but the manager coming back in under huge pressure. And I mean, it's no secret that perhaps the results weren't exactly what we'd have wanted in the first stretch. And it's been said to the point of cliche about this team kind of standing up and being counted when it really matters in that business end of the season to trot out another cliche. But it's cliche for a reason because this team is so good.
Don't worry, cliches are a thing in this podcast. I get hounded for saying too many cliches.
Football commentary in general. But I mean, it's true. I mean, the cliches exist because things repeat themselves time and time again. And with this Celtic side, under Brendan Rodgers, under the last manager, and over for the best part for 99% of the last 10, 15 years or so, like that consistency has been there. When there's been questions asked of them, they have responded, and it's been really interesting to see the kind of. I find the psychological side of it really interesting, where Callum McGregor was speaking recently about the manager's frustrations and the whole, is there a narrative being written about the club in a kind of negative pretext? And Callum McGregor saying that the players really kind of harnessed that and used that on the pitch. I find that side of it interesting because, from the media side of things, we don't always see that side of the dressing room where they are, they say they shut things out and they only focus on, game to game, and they focus on the pitch, which they do. But naturally, they're only human beings. They must be affected by some of the discourse. So, yeah, over the course, I couldn't have asked for any more. The League Cup exit is a bit of a freak. Kilmarnock played really well on the day. It's on a difficult pitch. It's at the start of the season when the man just came into an already winning side and trying to implement his own thing. So that is what it is. You go out at that early stage and you need to put it behind you. So to then come out with a traditional League and Cup double, especially when there was maybe suggestion that Celtic might not have ended up with anything this year. It just shows that, to go through what some might have perceived as a disappointing spell at one point to come out with a double at the other end, it's not too bad, is it?
Yeah, definitely not disappointed with a double at the end of the season, especially considering, as you quite rightly said, where Celtic were January, February time, maybe even December as well, booing Santa and the likes. I remember tweeting about that at the time. From then on, from December onwards, I know there was a couple of bumps in the road, but there was a real togetherness in January, February time, a real collective energy, and that's seen Celtic through to the end of the season. But we're, I think, is it 9 days until the transfer window opens, the 14th of June officially. I know that Celtic will be busy in the background getting stuff done, getting transfers signed, sealed and delivered, to quote Stevie Wonder. But Stevie Wonder would be able to see that Celtic need reinforcements in the summer window. There's a big one in between the sticks at number one. Joe Hart isn't going to be at the club anymore. He's retired from the game. In terms of a goalkeeper, what do you think Celtic are looking for? Do you think they're looking for somebody that's maybe a bit experienced, that's got, he's got longevity in the game and he can come in and make an instant impact? Or do you think that they're looking for a younger goalkeeper that they can maybe sell on in a couple of years, or something in the middle? What would be your, what do you think would be Celtic's preference, and then what would be your preference, is basically what I'm trying to say, Joe?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, as we've seen, especially with Joe Hart in the last few years, that the goalkeeping position is quite unique. I think that Celtic's model obviously is generally bringing players in to develop and then looking for a sell-on fee. But I don't think that's really the case for goalkeepers, especially when you look at, okay, Joe Hart's retired at 37, which in the modern game is quite young for a goalkeeper. I think if he hadn't announced he was retiring this year and kept going for another 2 or 3 years, maybe even past his 40s, that's not unusual these days, and it hasn't been for some time in the goalkeeping position. But I think that because you can sign goalkeepers 35 plus, the maturity is already there, and you could still get that kind of longer term commitment to the club. Naturally, you're not going to sell on at that point, but I do think that the mature head, the knowledge of the game, especially how much the goalkeeping position's changed over the last 10, 15 years in terms of playing out from the back, which we see a little bit less of under Brendan Rodgers, but it's still, compared to Ange Postecoglou, but it's still a real key facet of the game. I would personally like to see something in that age range, maybe kind of mid 30s, that we've still got a real potential to kind of carry the jersey forward, but having that knowledge and experience. Because I think that it's obviously Celtic is such a big club. It's such a big club for that position. With all due respect to Vasilis Barkas, it just didn't work out for him in more recent years. If you look back at his, I know that showreels only show you so much, but if you look back at his performances before coming to Celtic, and then the viral clips of him throwing himself all over the penalty box since he left Celtic, shows that there is a goalkeeper there, that clearly he was tapped up and looked at. Very kind of difficult circumstances, moving countries during COVID and stuff like that. But if you don't have that kind of experience and mentality and that ability to take on such a big club as Celtic, no matter what your experience is, you're gonna struggle. So I'd like to see. I know Tony Haggerty wrote a wonderful feature, which was published this morning for the Celtic Way, about why it's important to get someone in quickly, just in terms of embedding them and getting them into the squad and building from there. It does feel like we're getting linked with a goalkeeper every day at this point, which I suppose underlines the importance of the vacancy, which is an unusual position for Celtic to be in, because normally we're looking at, who knows what the future holds for Matt O'Reilly, but that is a massive position in Celtic squad. Normally, all the conversation would be around that. Now, we are having, conversations around it, but the big one is the goalkeeper. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to seeing what number one comes through the door. I think it's quite exciting because it's a position that has been, filled for three seasons now, and there's going to be somebody new in, probably somebody younger as well, which is quite exciting. It'll be interesting to see what age range they will be. I'm quite fine with an older goalkeeper, but a younger goalkeeper would do the business just as long as they're a good goalkeeper. I've got no doubts. Just touching on Barkas, I've got no doubts that Barkas is a good goalkeeper. I watched a good goalkeeper play for IK Athens. It's just the fit, and you've also got to say that it was an unprecedented time as well. And people use that for the league, but they can also use that for the players coming to the club too. You can put that to Ayeti as well. These players were just coming to the club. I think it's been reported that they had to stay in apartments as well. They didn't really get settled in their new surroundings. That is a big thing during a lockdown, during a pandemic. It's a massive thing, and Barkas just didn't acclimatise for whatever reason. But I'm delighted to see him do so well at Utrecht. It seems as if Utrecht is a landing spot for players like Sam Lammers and Vasilis Barkas to really get back on track with their career. So that's an interesting one. But it's going to be, intriguing to see who Celtic end up with. There has been loads and loads of links. There's the Man United goalkeeper. There's been 2 Turkish goalkeepers already linked with the club. There's been Vysen from Holland. There has been, even that 1 or 2 days that Liam Kelly get linked with the club, although I think he'll be going to the other side of the city. It's definitely a position that needs to get sorted sooner rather than later. Is that maybe a position you'd expect, if not the first signing, then potentially the second signing for Celtic to come through with?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to assume that it's been looked at heavily just now, and every single person that watched Joe Hart exit, obviously from the fans upwards, the captain, people like James Forrest who've been there a long time, even Liam Scales, who's virtually new in this squad, having come in this season, Brendan Rodgers as well. They all spoke about Joe Hart as a player and as a person. So that's huge, in terms of what they bring to the dressing room. Even the small things that about modern football that are so obvious, are so simple, but they're definitely worth underlining, like the communication that Joe Hart was maintaining between himself and predominantly Cameron Carter-Vickers and Liam Scales, and how that kind of infiltrates the team or filters through the team from there. Brendan Rodgers is a big speaker about the connectedness in a squad, and that's why he likes his goalkeepers to play out from the back, and that presence on and off the pitch is massive. So you'd have to assume that becomes priority in maintaining that backbone of the team. I think I don't really mind where we strengthen first, to be quite honest, but I think in terms of just settling the fans and settling the dressing room as well, I think the goalkeeper coming through the door first would be really big for me. I know I was kind of leaning towards maybe a more mature head, but you're right. I mean, any goalkeeper that can step in and just get things going from the very start. I remember when I worked at the club seeing, it was myself that did Joe Hart's first interview for Celtic TV, and just feeling that it was remote at the time because it was during COVID and with a European fixture, so Joe went straight over there. But I remember just feeling the bond that Callum McGregor and Joe Hart had right from the start, and I think that having that bond between such an important position, goalkeeper and captain, especially when your captain is such a workhorse, is such a central part of the team, being in central midfield, is really important. So yeah, I think that getting a goalkeeper in right away could really set up the rest of the transfer window as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the only place in defence, I would probably say, that needs to be strengthened too. We look at the defence that ended the season, and yes, they did do well in reclaiming, or retaining the league title and the Scottish Cup. 2 out of Celtic's 3 trophies were retained by Brendan Rodgers. Given where they were at the start of the season, I would say that's a massive, massive success. I don't think anybody's doubting that now. I think people are saying, "Oh, we want another treble, this and that," but I think we'll take the double just now. Go for the treble next season, but the double just now is a great get. The defence for me, this is just my own personal opinion. I think that 2 players need to be brought in defence: another centre back and another left back. Left back is a must, because regardless of what you think about Greg Taylor, yes, he's had some good moments, maybe had some down moments too, but he's the only left back at the club. The next available left back would probably be Mitchell Frame or Liam Scales if he was to go there, but he's never featured there under Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers just does not see him as a left back for whatever reason. Maybe that's just because his best position is at left centre back, because he kind of does go out wide sometimes, playing the ball out that way, but he is a central defender. Would you agree with that, with those 2 positions at centre back, someone to partner alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers, and then potentially a left back to compete or even overtake Greg Taylor in that pecking order?
Yeah, I think that's a completely fair assessment. I think it's the fundamentals of modern football, but Brendan Rodgers has also spoken a lot about the value of having competition for places, and it's nothing revolutionary. It makes sense that if someone's breathing down your back, that you want to push yourself a little bit harder, be that on match day or on the training pitch, which we don't see as much of on this side of defence. But I remember, again, when I was at the club a number of years ago, I had the pleasure of writing James Forrest's book, and the stats are there for everyone to see. Again, nothing revolutionary there. But when you look back over his stats, when Paddy Roberts was in that position as well and pushing him in that area, and I suppose the reverse of that is last season when James Forrest is doing that to the current wingers, the kind of younger crop of wingers, that if you've got someone there who is putting you under pressure, who is, vying for that position as well, it definitely brings out a better side in the team. So whether or not a left back comes in and overtakes Greg Taylor, for the example you gave, or another centre back comes in and gets in ahead of Liam Scales, having them there, just having them asking those questions in the same way that Josip Juranovic did when Tony Ralston stepped in, across that back line, just having those competition for places, and it applies to the whole team. It's, to see Matt O'Reilly come into the fold as a diehard, first on the team sheet choice this season was brilliant, because you just saw this remarkable player. It was always there, but maybe a little bit more in and out of the squad, or in and out of the first team rather, for those first couple of seasons, and then really just became so inevitable on that team sheet and invaluable to the squad. So yeah, across the back line, I just think we speak a lot about strength and depth at Celtic, and we've had it bang on in years gone by. There are some times where you're looking at the squad and thinking, is it strength and depth, or is it just a lot of bodies? So as a fine line in terms of getting that right. But this is a transfer window to do it, isn't it? We'd kind of hoped for some new faces in January, but it's a difficult time to bring in players. So yeah, to go in the summer and really strengthen in that back line should be really important for Celtic.
I think people are going to be wanting, and I certainly do subscribe to this, will be wanting quality rather than quantity of players. You want players that can immediately challenge for that first team spot, if not just grab it straight away and make themselves known in that first team. I think in terms of Cameron Carter-Vickers and Alistair Johnson at centre back and right back respectively, I'm quite happy with the two of them to remain. I think I was talking about this on the other podcast that I do. I was saying that Alistair Johnson has been one of Celtic's unsung heroes in the second half of the season. I was saying about the fact that when he took that mask off at Fir Park against Motherwell, something changed. It was almost like a superhero-esque transformation. I know it's a reverse transformation, because it's usually when you put the mask on, you become somebody different. When he took the mask off and he was all natural and he was playing through the pain barrier after, I think it was that injury he sustained at Easter Road, which was another big win too. I think that shows his character, and I think he's got the character to play for Celtic, hopefully long term. He's 25, 26 years old. He's still young, but he's not like at that young sort of wonder kid-esque level. So he's at that point of his career that maybe he could be one of the guys that stays longer term until he's 28, 29, 30. For me, I think he's going to be a massive player next season. And I'm quite happy with the right back position, because that was a position that really did, hamper Celtic, especially in seasons gone by in the past. Having Ralston as a very capable deputy to come on, and even Brendan Rodgers saying that in his press conference before the Scottish Cup final, saying that Tony Ralston will be getting more minutes next season. That's just due to the fixture list. There's going to be 4 competitions that they're playing in. Hopefully they stay in the League Cup longer than they did last year. But the 8 games in the Champions League too, there's going to need to be some rotation. Just at right back, before we move on to the midfield, are you quite happy with that position, with those two vying out for spots?
Yeah, I think so. And having spoken to Tony in the past, and I remember Johnny Hayes saying something similar when he was at the club. The players that I know it's, again, trotting out another cliche, but the players that get it. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about how Johnson gets it. Tony Ralston's come through the system as well, and Johnny Hayes, given his background and stuff like that, understands Celtic still, and understood it when he was there. But I've heard them say in the past that they see themselves as professional footballers. That's their job, and it sounds obvious, but you maybe get some players who have more of an ego, who really want to push for that first team spot, and if they're not getting it, they choose to move on to get first team football, and that's fine. That football needs to operate in that fashion, but there are guys who see themselves as the players who will step in when asked upon and work the players that are first choice really hard on the training pitch. And people like Tony Ralston, people like Johnny Hayes when he was here, people like James Forrest appear committed to that kind of profile, and that's great. It's great to see them being able to step in and do that. Alistair Johnson obviously has a remarkable record, having come in January last year, and it just feels phenomenal that he's a player that feels like he's been here for a very long time, doesn't he? Because he's just settled in. He seems to understand what it takes here. He's not scared. I've heard him say in the past, he's not scared to throw himself into a tackle. I watched him on the Celtic View, the Celtic FC podcast shortly after winning the title, and he was saying that
he's brilliant.
Yeah, he was very good. He's a funny and articulate guy, but he's saying playing so close to the byline, you hear some of the shouts when the crowd are getting a little bit frustrated at 0-0, and he's playing the ball back to his goalkeeper, or he's playing it kind of horizontal to Cameron Carter-Vickers inside. And he said he loves that. He loves that pressure of, it's still 0-0, and yet Celtic fans are groaning at the sidelines at 10 minutes into the game when he knows things will come good and he wants to get the ball forward. He said there's no happier person in the stadium when Celtic score early because it just takes the pressure off. But even that, I mean, being able to have fun with, I don't think anyone criticising from the stands in that moment is it's nothing personal. It's just the way you get at a game where you want Celtic to score and maybe things are a little bit sticky in those opening minutes. But for him to be able to turn that into, a joke and be a bit self-referential, I love that. So yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying before about competition for places. For me, I think there's more to come from Johnson, and I think given his trophy haul already, given his performances, as you said in the latter half of last season, that bodes so well that this is a player on the up, given he's already given us so much already.
Yeah, and quite incredible signing. Thinking, I remember he was getting linked with the club during the World Cup, and he was asked about it, and I think you could tell by his facial reactions that he was joining Celtic because he's good at many things, but holding a poker face is definitely not one of them. He'd be a terrible poker player because he could not hide the fact that he'd been talking to Celtic. And you knew then at that point that he was going to be joining the club. I always think that's quite interesting with I remember it was Canada against Croatia. It was Juranovic versus Johnson.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think there was an influx of about, I don't know how many Celtic fans would have been in watching that, but, it was like a battle almost, the present versus the future. That was absolutely brilliant to see. But yeah, it's so good to see that he's acclimatised his record. His games to trophies record is absolutely incredible at this point in time, and hopefully he can keep that going. He would have felt a bit weird not winning the League Cup because he's quite used to winning with Celtic at this point in time.
Was it Cal McGregor that had said, we want our trophy back? I know that you guys were speaking about this. Like that attitude of a champion, and it was said kind of tongue in cheek, but there is a truth that he wants his trophy back. And the first player I thought of was Alistair Johnson, because he's come in January. He's played a huge role in securing that treble last year, and then he's again played a huge role in securing the double. And part of him must think, this is strange. I'm only used to winning trophies at Celtic, which I can only imagine the drive that gives players.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a class act both on and off the park, and hopefully he can keep that going for next season. Just going on to the midfield now. And the midfield's quite an interesting one because I think there's two areas that you can kind of talk about, maybe two or even three. I don't personally think, this is just my personal opinion coming through again, but I don't think that Bernardo is necessarily going to be the Matt O'Reilly replacement. I think the Matt O'Reilly replacement, I mean, Tony doesn't even want to get bogged down in replacements or that, or replacing players. That's what he was saying yesterday. But, if one player goes out, you need another player to come in. I think we're yet to hear about Matt O'Reilly's long-term replacement. I think Bernardo's just a smart business choice. But before I go on to talking about maybe the further forward midfielders, do you think there's maybe an argument to bring in another number 6 ahead of next season? Or do you think that maybe, I know there's been quite a lot of talk about Bosun Lawal. League One's a different standard, I get that, to what he would be playing in the Champions League, but a defensive midfielder, a guy that's clearly a defensive midfielder, not a centre-back, as the club seem to want to make him. He seems to have found his position. Do you think that next season could be, basically what I'm trying to say, do you think next season could be the season that he really blossoms into a first-team Celtic player? Or do you think that he'll make that move to the Championship and maybe get more minutes? Because I think if he goes to the Championship, then I think a Championship team will pick him up next season. I'd much rather see him develop at Celtic and get game time.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one because, again, when I was at the club and covering the Celtic B team, I saw Bosun play at centre-back, and very different, atmosphere, very different standards, although of very good standard, to be fair. But he just looked so comfortable. There was, without over romanticising it or being grandiose about it, there was an element of Virgil van Dijk about his style of play. He just seemed to any time he had to drop the shoulder to get ahead of people, he would when he was helping set up attacks. That burst of pace he had, and he just seemed to shrug people off the ball. Every single cross ball that came into the box in the games I saw him, he was on top of it. He seemed like a real commanding central defender. And then, you start to see progression in career where he starts to move forward a little bit up the pitch. I was hugely excited anytime that I saw him beforehand, kind of been keeping tabs on his career, and the fact that he just seems to be going from strength to strength. Again, with the transfer window, and you and I have spoken about this before, Ryan, off camera, about the transfer window, what it means to Celtic. Would you like to see I mean, ideally, you'd like to just open the checkbook and replace or have reinforcements all over the pitch. But I think personally, I'd like to see 2 or 3 players that can come in and just hit the ground running, just do a job and, really strengthen what we already have. And in those gaps, I think that's where people like Bosun, Lawal come in. Those I say prospects, that sounds passionate, he's been there for a long time, but players that have something to prove in the first team. And I think that getting him more involved in the first team squad, I know that he's been up at training over the last few years and has really made an impression behind the scenes at Celtic. And allowing the fans to see a little bit more of that would be ideal for me in that position there. I do think that, in the interest of having backup and having those competition for places, it would be great to see us strengthen all over the pitch. But realistically, in terms of how much money Celtic are likely to spend in the transfer window, I don't see that as a position that we necessarily need to spend in, especially when someone like Bosun has potential for coming back in and filling that space and really showing off what he's made of.
Also, the captain plays there as well. He plays as
exactly.
number 6. It's like a false number 6 because he isn't imposing. He's not an imposing sort of player. He's a smaller number 6 than maybe you're used to. Your Wanyama's even modern day like Rodri. Rodri's still an imposing presence, even though he's a number 6.
It goes without saying that Callum takes that spot every single time that he's fit. But interesting this year seeing how, because I was kind of commenting with some of my friends about the way that Callum McGregor was brought back into the team. Clearly, if it wasn't for the title push and the fact that it was quite close at stages, despite Celtic finishing the league 8 points clear, there was points where it felt a bit tighter. I think in different circumstances, Callum McGregor would have been kept for longer, and he would have just been reassimilated back into the team. And then the way that Scott Brown always was, if Scott Brown was unfit, he was out of the team, and if he was fit, he was the first name on the team sheet. It was interesting to see Brendan Rodgers stagger Callum's reintroduction to the team, but it is reflective of how many games he plays a season, isn't it? I think Joe Hart was the only player that played more than him this year, which makes sense. I think was Joe Hart 49, possibly. Don't quote me directly on
total appearances. Kyogo was up there as well, just due to coming off the bench in some games and starting.
Yeah, exactly.
Games, so.
And I know that Liam Scales, in terms of how his season went, he was the same. But Callum McGregor plays all those games. That's him back into the Scotland fold as well. So, whether he's, don't want to see him get injured, of course, but even if things are doing okay and you don't need him in there, having someone that's able to drop in and just ease up the pressure on someone like Callum McGregor, and the fact that the way that Brendan Rodgers reintroduced him this year doesn't set a precedent for it, but it kind of makes it okay. Because I saw a lot of people saying, well, if Callum McGregor's fit, he should be in the team as a captain. But I thought it was a really smart way that we brought him back in, just giving him, maybe 30 minutes and then the 60 minutes and then building up to it, because when it mattered, clearly, it really pushed Celtic on. So having someone else to step in there, whether that's Bosun Lawal or someone else, definitely makes sense. But of course, Cal has that position, every single day of the week when he's fully fit and needed.
Yeah, he's got it on lock, definitely, unless he was to move further forward. But I think he's found that position. Doesn't need to do as much running as what he did before in his career, which is good. It preserves him for longer as well in that number 6 position. So as long as he's playing well and continuing to play well, I've got no issues with him being there. Just quickly on Paulo Bernardo, there's been a lot of talk recently about Celtic wanting to get this guy in permanently on a permanent deal. It's looking like it will happen now that all the noise coming from both Portugal and Scotland is positive, that the player wants to continue his Celtic career. He sees his future career being at Celtic under Brendan Rodgers. Just what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a good sign, and it's a worthwhile signing, given that he's already been at the club a year, he's acclimatised, and he's ready for what's to come next season if he has to join?
Yeah, I think so. There's talk of because obviously at this time of the year you hear a lot of shouts and murmurs and whispers and whatever about fees and things. I saw the latest was potentially 3.5 million with 3 million up front at Celtic, which is considerably less. I mean, there's talk of 6 and maybe even 7 at one point. So I think if there's truth in the 3 million up front, 3.5 with
that's a no-brainer. That fee,
that feels like a no-brainer at this point. Yeah, I think it's 6. I was unsure. I mean, I think that he's worth it. I was unsure if, in terms of contextualising how much Celtic will spend in any given transfer window, is he worth it? And it's a shame in the scope of world football, it's buttons, really, isn't it? But it's kind of how we need to be realistic when we approach these things. I think that we speak about players that have got more to offer. Certainly, he falls into that category, doesn't he? The two obvious key standout moments of the season was that wonderfully taken goal against Rangers, and then how he forces or how he instigates the goal which wins us the double, which wins us the Scottish Cup final. Could have easily went down with that challenge in the middle of the pitch, and having that drive and that presence of mind and that willingness to keep going. Gets a little bit of luck in terms of the goalkeeper makes an error, but he doesn't make that error without the shot. And to have the goal or the confidence to take that shot on at that time in the game, when you're looking at extra time, and it would have been easy to have looked for a pass either way, to take the shot on and then force the goal, was brilliant from him. So, yeah, I think he seems keen. He seems to... I'm always really cautious about he seems to get it, but at the same time, he does. And it is a cliche, and it is one which sometimes carries weight, sometimes doesn't. But you see the way he threw himself into the celebrations as well off the pitch. He seems to really like it, and have enjoyed his time here. If he's got more to offer, like you say, he might not be the Matt O'Reilly replacement, but he will have more space to operate. He will have more scope. Assuming Matt O'Reilly leaves, I would love to see him stay. It just feels like everything's kind of pointing towards that. Yeah. But especially if we do sell Matt O'Reilly, you'd have to assume that is for a reasonable fee. And if the 3 million up front, 3.5 all told is true, and that's what they're looking for, then he seems like a no-brainer for me, especially in that position where in recent years, if we go back even a couple of years before, with people like Aaron Moy filling in that central role, David Turnbull as well, it feels like he could have more to offer next year and years to come if we get him on a permanent basis.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in a hot take. He could potentially be the Hatate replacement if he leaves. Not a lot of people are talking about Hatate, but he was quite vocal last season about wanting to try a new challenge. I know he signed that 5-year deal in September. I think it was the day before Matt O'Reilly, actually. Those 2 days, that 2-day double contract renewal is going to help Celtic so much in the next couple of years with their transfer fees for those 2 players, sign them to long-term deals. I think, and everybody knows on this podcast how much I really admire Hatate as a football player. I just wonder if he'll want to move to pastures now. He's 26 years old. He's a young 26 due to getting his scholarship in uni in Japan. The way that he's went about his career is a bit different, but I could see him leaving in the summer as well. That it could be entirely feasible that O'Reilly and Hatate both leave the club this summer, in which case that's a massive hole that needs filled. And even bringing in Bernardo, not to say he's a direct replacement for Hatate, because he's not, he's a different player, but having somebody that's been at the club for a year is smart business. And I think he's on the precipice of just having that breakout season at Celtic. I think if he can keep it going, he had that good festive period, that culminated in a great finish against Rangers, one of the goals of the season. But I just think if you give him game time, he's going to thrive. And for 3.5 million, if there's a sell-on clause, you'll be making money off of him anyway. If you need to worry about a sell-on clause, then you've done well, because he's getting that much that it's actually impacting the transfer fee. So yeah, they might as well bring the fee down and then get him in permanently. Just on the forward areas, I think Celtic are going to need to do some business in the summer with wingers as well. I know they've done a lot of business with wingers in the past 2 windows. Nicholas Kuhn coming in January, Yang, Palma coming in the summer. None of them have really, apart from that 2-month spell with Palma and Kuhn for a couple of games, have really set the heather alight at all. So much so that James Forrest, who was quite far removed from things, has came in and now is a first pick. He's got his international call up because of that as well. So congratulations to him. But it's definitely a position that needs strengthened. You look at the stability beforehand of having Jota and Abada, who were starting most games in the first season. Second season, Maeda was in there. Can't forget about Maeda. But it's a position, or it's 2 positions that need to be filled next season, in my opinion. I think there needs to be a couple of really solid signings in those areas. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And it's an area that underpins Brendan Rodgers' philosophy, isn't it? And that's why we saw so much success in his first time here from those wide areas. And then when he starts to adapt the inverted fullbacks, we are going kind of more all out with wing backs, and it's having those players really pushing, really forcing that high press and offense, really high intensity offense that Celtic are so well known for under Brendan Rodgers. It's a crucial area. James Forrest has done remarkably well. He said himself that back in January he wasn't really sure what his future held for Celtic in terms of working hard behind the scenes, but maybe not getting a sniff at anything. He absolutely deserves his place in the team. He's also coming up for 33, and the manager speaks about maybe him not being quite as physically able in terms of that explosiveness that he might have had in his younger days. And James speaks very frankly about, working hard behind the scenes, learning from younger players, which I thought was quite refreshing, given that we make so much about how long he's been here and the amount of trophies he's won, and the fact that he's so close to becoming the most decorated Celtic player ever, which is remarkable. But he still has that kind of humility, that humbleness, where he's looking to learn from young players. I think that he absolutely deserves his place in the team, but the question of whether he should have his place in the team, given his age and given that position, is a different conversation. And that is more a reflection on where he needs to be being pushed. Again, speaking about the competition for places, the younger guys, whilst they can admire James Forrest, surely must be looking at an older player and thinking, that's what I need to do. I need to get to that level to be in that first team. And as you say, you mentioned Palmer, those first 6-8 weeks, whatever it was, where he really looked like something. There is an element of disappointment that he didn't keep pushing that forward. But again, looking at it more positively, it shows that there is that player there. It's clearly why he's been brought into the team. And in terms of looking at players that have more to offer, he's surely another one there. Nicholas Kuhn, I think, is, for me personally, maybe a bit more of a kind of jury's out player. He's spoken quite frankly about not being match fit up until maybe the cup semi-final. I think he was speaking that he felt like he was getting to that position. So, to give him the benefit of not doubt per se, but I just think that there are moments in games where he maybe isn't contributing as much as he might like. So again, in terms of bringing more to the squad, there perhaps has more to come. But again, as simple as it is, I think having that competition, bringing in new faces. James Forrest spoke about this recently when he broke into the team. He said whenever younger players come in, he starts to think, right, I need to up my game. That must apply across the board, especially if James Forrest is nearly 33 and commandeering one of those first team positions. It'd be great to have someone with the same intensity as Dyson Maeda. I'm not sure that they exist, but having
one of a kind.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not saying anything new, but that goal that he scored against Rangers, is a bit lucky in terms of getting the direction of the ball and to get the break in which he did. But it's probably the only player in Scottish football, never mind the Celtic team, that deserves that luck. He's the only player that can force that type of goal and that work rate. But that, it has to be the standard. I'm not saying that you can hit that with the forward players, and I'm not sure that having that fitness and that athleticism and that raw power exists in terms of the players that we'll be looking at. But it has to be the standard. Do you know what I mean? It has to be that's the level of intensity that a Brendan Rodgers winger forward player looks like. And I'd like to see us looking to reinforce in that area for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We've went through all of the positions bar one, which is the striking position. There's been a lot of talk recently about Adam Ida, who scored last night for Ireland against Hungary, a good goal as well, so well done to him. Although I did see the tweet from Premier Sports that said it was the Norwich City striker, and it made me realise, he's not at the club anymore. He's not I know he was only there temporary, but he's not a Celtic player anymore. He's back at Norwich. By all accounts, I think Celtic want to keep Adam Ida. They want to keep him around. Brendan Rodgers was talking about the fact that he was a player that he can work with and improve. You don't really work with players for just 6 months. Just going through any sort of level of football. Usually they'll stay longer than 6 months if they're going to improve under a manager. But you did start to see the improvements of Adam Ida under the manager. I mean, look at the goal return. I think it was 9 goals in 19 games. His goal to start record was incredible too. There has been talk recently as well, although it was more internet rumours than anything else, about Odsonne Edouard. He's been back up. He was at the Hydro Player of the Year. I did put out a poll yesterday on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it about if you could take one, who would it be? And at the moment, I think it's 60-40 to Odsonne Edouard, in favour of Odsonne Edouard. I think there's people are just loving the memories of the past. What's your take on the striking position? Because obviously Kyogo's 29. He had a bit of a mixed season despite scoring 19 goals. He did pop up in the big moments, popped up in the Champions League too. Do you see Celtic obviously we do see Celtic bringing in a striker this summer, because I don't think O is going to be second choice. I think he'll probably move on to pastures now as well. Where do you see Celtic going with this? Do you see them pursuing Adamida again? Do you see them going to the past and maybe looking at somebody like Odsonne Edouard, who has a year left on his deal? Where do you see the club going in this particular standpoint?
Yeah, I think being realistic, I loved Odsonne Edouard at Celtic, as many fans did as well. I'm not sure that once players go away and get a taste of wages elsewhere, I don't know that it's feasible in Scotland. I know that it has happened where players have went down and come back up. I use that to kind of couch expectations, even just for myself. But I do think that type of striker, like Adamida, is another key part of Brendan Rodgers' sides, isn't it? I think that Kyogo, yeah, I mean, he seemed to score so many goals at the start of the season and kind of drop off and then pop up with kind of important goals as the season went on. Perhaps not as good as he's been as per the standards which he's set in previous seasons, but he's still, for me, the best striker in the country. He's just so talented. He can turn it on. His goal against Rangers December was just remarkable, wasn't it? But I do think that if we think historically about Brendan Rodgers' teams, Odsonne Edouard and Ryan Christie, Moussa Dembele and Stuart Armstrong, that striker that has the strength to allow an overlap from a kind of deeper position to drop deep and get the ball and collect it and move forward. We're starting to see flashes of that in Adamida's play, especially in the last few weeks of the season. You mentioned progression. I think that if we look at a player coming in January to where he came in, obviously scored important goals right from the start. To finish up for this spell, I'd love to see Adamida back, but to finish up with a goal in a cup final, it feels rare. It feels rare that a player can have such an impact and understanding with the fans and understanding with the manager. I realised that in 2019 there was a lot of turbulence when Brendan Rodgers left in February, but if you compare it to people like Ollie Burke or Timothy Weah, who had an impact in that time, but they were given a benefit of the doubt to a degree because it's hard to make such an impact from January forward. Now, the consistency and the context is completely different this time, but Adamida has shouldered, all the expectation. He's goal in the 3 each game at Ibrox. He's really shown that he has that grit, that determination, that capability, that coolness to get the goal in the cup final. I'd love to see him back, and I think he fits the profile of a Brendan Rodgers team to have, not to compare, Kyogo and Lee Griffiths aren't the same kind of striker, but that on the shoulder of the last defender, able to be that penalty box striker and then have that replacement in the same way that Giakoumakis and Kyogo had in years gone by. So Adamida would be the one for me, but I do think that if it's not him, not sure exactly who, but that big presence, big aerial ball winning striker who can drop deep to collect and play with a midfielder on the overlap is someone that it fits the kind of DNA of a Celtic striker. And listen, I'd love it to be Adamida if Celtic and Norwich can make that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to see him back as well. I think Adamida would like to come back too, because it seems as if for the first time in a long time he's felt like he's got a home now and he's got a place where he's getting game time. His third choice behind Ashley Barnes and Josh Sargent at Norwich City. I know Norwich City signed Sidney Van Hooijdonk on loan, and that didn't seem to go too well. So I think Celtic won in terms of that overall transaction between getting new strikers in and offloading their old strikers. But yeah, I'd love to see Adamida stay at the club. I think if there's a deal to be made between the two sides, then let's see it happen. But if that potential return is available for Odsonne Edouard, with a year left, I know the wages are a stumbling block. I know there's people that would maybe say that, they don't want him back, maybe down tools in the last season, which I don't necessarily agree with because he scored over 20 goals. There'll be an article tomorrow in which Tony and I are debating about this. We've did a collaborative article. One's arguing in favour of Adamida and the other's arguing in favour of Odsonne Edouard. And you can probably tell who I've went for between those two. But yeah, it's an argument. It's definitely a debate to be had. And listen,
I think so much of that weighs on what the player wants, isn't it? It's about the down tools thing. I'm the same as yourself. I don't agree with that. I think that it was an easy thing to say at the time. I think.
And I think Joe has left us on the thing. He has clicked off. I don't know if maybe his battery has gone, but I think we'll just end the stream off there. Sorry about that, guys. Joe's there. He is. He's back on. Actually, I was just about to end the stream, and then you came back on. Did it refresh or something?
I think yeah, it must have refreshed. Google must have decided that I was talking rubbish. But no,
what were you saying? Sorry.
Yeah. Not at all. Apologies for that someday. Yeah. With Odsonne Edouard, I think that he's just that kind of character, isn't he? That quite muted, quite laid back, and it can come across as kind of, I don't know, lackadaisical or something like that. I certainly, I've always admired him. I don't think he down tools. I think that's a little bit unfair at a time when, yeah, there was frustrations obviously in that last season. But listen, I'd have him back for the song alone. I'm a massive Stone Roses fan, and I thought it was incredible when the crowd were singing his name. So, but no, a fantastic player. It's exciting. I think, like we said at the start of the conversation, for me, getting the goalkeeper in and getting a striker, and if it's Adamida, that'd be great for me. If it's not, and it's someone that we can get behind, I think those, if we get them in early, like we have done in previous years, where the key positions are filled quickly. And again, I get that that's been idealistic. I realise it's not as straightforward as that, but it would certainly calm the nerves and kind of keep things, get the fans right behind everything from the outset.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to end the stream and then you came back on, so I had to reverse a wee bit and then give
it's your my one Odsonne Edouard. I'd left and then came back. So
there you go. Hopefully that's the first of many returns. I know there's quite a few Celtic players or former Celtic players that are looking to probably move on, and that's probably great for the news publications to be writing about that as well, because there's so many players that are constantly on the move. But yeah, is there any other sort of positions that you want to talk about, or players that you want to talk about before we end off the stream? We usually go on for 40 minutes. I realise that we're on for 45 minutes today, but I thought we would talk about every position on the team. We didn't want to leave out the striker or leave out any other specific part of the team. We've went through 1 to 11, I think. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we finish off?
I don't think so. I think that it's just it's an exciting time, isn't it, of the seasons? It's a funny when there's windows in years gone by that you thought were really good and then perhaps didn't turn out to be such. There's ones that you felt maybe perhaps underwhelming that have been remarkable windows. So no, I'm really looking forward to seeing. I quite enjoy the speculation part of it. Maybe that's me just being a bit of a masochist, but I quite enjoy just seeing the conversations happening, but equally look forward to them settling down over the next couple of months and several weeks. But yeah, I think again, oversimplifying, but some early business would definitely suit, just to get things moving, and then because you know what it's like, as soon as the season's finished, I know we've got the Euros to kind of keep us ticking over in the summer, but as soon as that last game's been, you just want the next one, and the transfer window is the kind of main focal point between times. So some early business, some replacements, some reinforcements, maybe even some younger players stepping up, and then we can get ourselves in the position to be looking at next season proper, as we've got the new format, Champions League, and everything else that entails. So
yeah, very, very exciting. Celtic versus Ayr United can't come quick enough. The first pre-season game, already looking forward to that. Just having some Celtic to talk about. I know they've only been gone a week, but it feels like ages. Joe, thank you very much for coming on this morning. Both Tony and Hamish have been off today, so we've got the super sub that is Joe, but we'll get Joe back on for plenty more appearances over the summer, just when people are off on holiday, etc, etc. We're going to try and change it about a bit over the summer and bring in loads of recurring guests, but Joe will be on more and more. Thank you very much, Joe, for coming on. Really do appreciate it. Thank you to our sponsors at MPH Boilers and Weissman. And if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel and the website, subscribing to the YouTube channel is completely free, and the uptake in that has been incredible as well. Just press that button just below the video. www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. £4 for 4 months. You'll have Tony's opinion piece on goalkeepers and how it feels like Groundhog Day. With every day, there seems to be a new goalkeeper linked with the club. So if you want to get involved in that, plus my exclusive interview with a Danish journalist about Matthias Kvistgaarden, then please check that out as well. It's all on the website. £4 for 4 months. Please subscribe. Joe, thank you very much for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow. I think both Hamish and Tony will be back tomorrow. So we will see you then, guys. Thank you very much and have a good rest of your day. Cheers.